Hello and welcome to this class. Today we are going to see mainly two things with respect to Fourier transform. One is the complexity of Fourier transform computation. This we will see for 1D and 2D cases. And then we will move to a new topic where we will see some of the important properties of Fourier transform. Okay. So let us start with the computation of the complexity for Fourier transform, and let us see first the 1D case. So I hope you remember the formulae for computing the forward and inverse DFT in 1D case. These are, if you have any doubt, you can just see these formulae. So let us talk about computing the forward DFT and then see how how many operations we do there and what should be the complexity of that. So if you go through this expression, you have two kinds of operations here. One is where you are doing the multiplication, and then another is the summation that you are performing with the help of this sigma that you have written here, right? And if you see on the left side, you have FU. So how many FU you are computing? U varies from 0 to n minus 1. That means there are U is going to take n different values. So we can say that whatever we have on the right side, this thing is computed how many times? Total n times. First, for u equal to 0, you are computing this, you can say product and then summation. Then for u equal to 1, you are computing product and summation, and so on. Okay. So if you can find out for one u, let's say for u equal to 0, how many product, summation and products you are doing, then with the help of that, we can say that for all other remaining values of u also, we will be doing the same thing, and then based on that, we can compute the complexity. So let us see for f0, when u equal to 0, we are computing f0, and for f0, how many multiplications will be required? So you know, so let's say u equal to 0, this series will again go from x equal to 0 to n minus 1, only the value of u will be 0 here. Okay. So how many product you will compute? This you are going to take n different values of x. So that means this term is going to be computed n times, right? So n multiplications are required. And then when you get all those n multiplications, then you will add them to compute the sigma. So you can say the total number of additions which are required are n, right? Exactly it will be n minus 1, but let us for the simplicity, let us assume that they are also n. So how many operations total required for computing f0? N plus n, 2n, right? So 2n operations are required to compute f0. Similarly, when you change u equal to 0 to u equal to 1, again same kind of operations you are going to conduct. So 2n operations are required here too. And similarly, for all f that you are going to compute for all possible values of u, everywhere you are going to incur 2n operations. Now, how many different u are going to take? As I just said, u varies from 0 to n minus 1. That means there are n different values of u. That means n different f you are going to compute. So these computations that you see here, they are going to be total n. And every computation is incurring how many operations? We just discussed 2n. So 2n into n will give you, if you multiply n to 2n, this gives you total number of operations that you need to compute fu. Okay, so how many operations you need? 2n square. So you can say that this is of order n square. So if your input signal has n points or n values you are supplying, or your function f is defined with the help of n values, you are going to get n different frequencies, and for that process you are going to incur order of n square operations. Okay, and if you have understood this part, then it is very easy to find out how many operations you need in the inverse transform, because it is exactly the same procedure, right? The same number of operations you are going to have here also. So for inverse DFT also, you will find that order of n square operations are required to compute it. Okay. So this is the complexity that we just discussed, order of n square. It is by using direct these straightforward formulas that we have here, and with the help of this, when we compute the complexity, we get complexity order n square, right? Exactly what we discussed in the previous class, previous slide. And if you remember, in the last class, I introduced a new algorithm for computing the Fourier transform, that was fast Fourier transform. Though we are not going to discuss this algorithm in detail here, but I mean, we'll only discuss few things with respect to this algorithm. So this FFT, as we said, that this is fast Fourier algorithm. This is faster as compared to the normal procedure that we are following here to compute the complexity. So it turns out that if you are using FFT to compute the Fourier transform of 1D signal having n different values for x, let's say, so then its complexity is coming to be order n log n. So if you compare with this normal procedure that we just discussed, there is a difference of you have n here and you have log n here in place of that. One n is common in both the cases. So overall you have n square complexity here and you have n log n complexity here. And if you compare the number of operations when n is large, this difference actually you will see that it will be significant. So you just remember this result. We will be again using it in the case of 2D. Just remember that if you are using FFT, the DFT, discrete Fourier transform computation can be done using order of n log n operations, right? In normal case, it is order n square operations. Just remember these results. Now here, by exactly, I mean, counting the same kind of operations that we discussed in the case of 1D, you will find that if you just find out how many total multiplications and then additions are required, you'll find that very easily you can see that this is going to come of order n to the power 4. Okay, in case of 1D it was n square, but in case of 2D it is going to come n to the power 4, and to get this value you can again see how many possible x and y you have and how many product you will get and then how many summations you are going to do, and then based on that it is very easy to find out that this is going to come order n to the power 4. Okay. Now we will see that, and we are discussing this 2D case in detail because for our images we need 2D transform only. And if you see the complexity of the 2D transform, 2D Fourier transform, I mean by using the normal formula, you see that this is coming very huge. It is n to the power 4, and normally our images will be 256 cross 256 or 512 cross 512 at least. So this, if you keep that value here, you find that the number of operations are really very huge. So we are actually interested in reducing this complexity. So we will see there are two ways of reducing the complexity. One is you use fast Fourier transform, and another is another smart trick that we will be using, and with the help of that also we can reduce the complexity up to some extent. Okay, not as much as we get in case of fast Fourier transform, but I mean significantly we can reduce this complexity. So now let us see in the case of 2D transform how to reduce this complexity. So this complexity can be reduced if we explore the property of this Fourier transform formula that we have, and this is the property is the property of separability. So what we exactly mean by this, I'll just explain here. So if you see this formula for the forward DFT here, you find that this exponent, this e to the power minus j 2 pi ux plus vy by n term that we are using here, this can be actually written, this can be separated and written like this. How you are separating? You are basically segregating x term and y term. There you are putting x and y term separately. So if you just see this, there is no difference between this and this. I mean, you can just, if you, since the base are same, when you sum the exponent, you will get again same thing, right? So this property is called this property of separability. This this e to the power, whatever expression you have here, this can be separated in two parts, and this will be actually a great help. You will see, just because of this property, we will be able to reduce the complexity of the transform drastically. Okay, so now you see, this is the formula for the 2D transform. We know this is the formula for the 2D transform. Now in this 2D transform, let us apply that property of separability on this. So x term and y term will be separated. Now whatever x term you are getting from here, we are writing that x term here, we are taking it out from this summation, because this summation is only for y. So for this summation, whatever x term you have, that is constant, so it can be taken out. So we have taken that out here, and only y term we have written here. Okay. So now let's say this y term, which is very similar to what we have in case of 1D Fourier transform. Let us say we are writing this particular term as fxv. Okay. So now when you write this particular term as fxv, then this fuv becomes this, right? Whatever you have 1 by n sigma this, all this term is here, and in place of this second term that you have, in place of whatever you have in the second summation, in the place of that you have written fxv. Okay. Now let us see how it is helping. So please remember what we are saying, that what is fxv. Fxv is this formula. We are going to use this in the next slide. So if you just see what is fxv, again I'm just rewriting the same thing. So we said that this thing is equal to fxv. Okay. Now let us just do little mathematics and multiply 1 by n to it, and to balance that multiply another n. So when you multiply it n outside and then keep 1 by n inside, you will see that this is nothing but, what is this formula? This is the Fourier transform of 1D signal. If you just ignore, let's say you just for time being assume that there is no x here, this is just fy. So you will find that this formula is exactly like what you have in case of 1D Fourier transform, right? And I mean the formula that we have discussed, there the variable was x, right? I mean if you see the 1D Fourier transform formula here, you see that x is there. In this formula x is there, right? You have written fx, everywhere x was there, but in that formula in place of x you have just y. So this formula, if you just ignore this x for time being, you can say that this is Fourier transform for 1D case. Okay. Now what 1D signal it is defining? So if you assume that let's say your image is like this, where x is varying in this direction, y is varying in this direction. When x becomes constant, and if you change y, basically you will get a particular column. For given x, if you change y, you will find that you will get a 1D signal, which is nothing but a column of your image. Okay. So here, in this case, I am saying that for this particular expression, x is going to be constant. X is going to be constant because you don't see anything here in this whole expression which is changing x. X is like a constant. But if you see the overall formula, x will be changing, because if you see here, we are saying that this is fxv, but this fxv is for a particular x. Let's say if your x is 0, then this will be capital F 0v. If x is equal to 1, then it will be capital F 1v, and so on, right? So from this formula you can say that this is going to be a 1D Fourier transform of a column of your image for a given x or for a particular x. But how many different x you have? You will have n different values of x. And if you see this formula, here we are saying that this is n multiplied by 1 by n and this whole term. And this whole 1 by n, whatever you have 1 by n, and after that, this is telling you the Fourier transform. So, and as I said that this particular part can be termed as 1D Fourier transform, where your 1D signal is a column in your image. So how many such so what we are saying here is actually the DFT of rows, because we are assuming that our notations are a little bit different. Just a minute. So if we consider that this is your x and this is your y, this side is your y. So when you fix x, you don't get actually column like this, you get a for fixed x, your y is changing, so you basically the values will change in this direction. So if you change your notation, this is just the matter of notation. So if you change your notation and make your this side x and this side y, then for a fixed x, this is going to tell you a column, going to tell you a row. So if you just consider this formula which I have included in this circle, this is telling you the Fourier transform of a particular row, right? So this whole thing that we are having here, this is nothing but DFT of rows performed n times. So for how many rows you will have, this is basically saying that for each row that you have here, you consider that row as 1D function and then take its DFT. Okay, I hope this is clear. Why we are saying that this is 1D? I already explained that for this term x is constant. When x is constant, then this is nothing but a 1D function. So we can directly apply the formula of 1D transform. And when we say that for a constant x, this is giving you a 1D function, that is nothing but a row of your image, right? And when you change x, when you keep this for the overall computation, you will find that, and so we are basically saying that this is fxv. So for a particular x, this formula is going to come. But if you change x, this formula will, if you change x, what you are going to get from here is going to be different, because for a different x, if a particular x, let's say you are talking about this row, for a different x, you will talk about another row, and so on. Okay. So this computation of fxv is nothing but computing the 1D transform of n rows that you have in your image. Okay. So once we do that, we will get fxv completely. And if you keep that fxv in your original formula, if you again, let us go back here, we said that this particular part is fxv. Now let us replace this part by fxv in the oral formula. So you'll find that the expression for fuv becomes 1 by n sigma x equal to 0 to n minus 1 e to the power minus j 2 pi ux by n fxv, right? So for this computation, your signal is now fxv. Now please remember here in fxv, now v is going to be constant, only v change, x is changing, because you have x as variable here. Only value of x is changing from 0 to n minus 1. There is no point here where you are changing the v. So in this case, v is constant. So what basically we have done by computing fxv, up to some extent we have taken this image to some intermediate representation where you have got your rows of the image here computed or converted to Fourier transform. Okay. So you can say that when you perform operation on the original image I, or let's say we are calling this function as f, when you perform the operation on f and you get fxv, we have basically converted our rows to frequency domain. Intermediate image which you have here like this, these are all the rows that you see. All these rows are not now representing the original values, they are representing the frequency values. So now in this formula, if you just this same formula that we discussed here, where we have replaced this by fxv, we are writing here. So when you write this this formula, this expression, when you replace this particular part, the second summation by fxv, and get this equivalent representation for the 2D Fourier transform, again this left side can be actually termed as 1D Fourier transform, because again v is constant here. So if you assume that v is constant, then what is changing? Only one variable. So if you, let us say just for time being, ignore that this v is not here, then this expression will look as if this is the 1D transform, right? Or Fourier transform of a 1D signal. Okay. So now by using this 1D formula, you can, for different values of v, you will get different fxv, And for all those different f's that you are going to get for different v's, you can just compute their Fourier transform, and when you will put together all the Fourier transform that you are going to get for all possible v's, that will give you the final Fourier transform. Okay. So this we can understand actually with the help of so here what we are going to do in the previous case we said that we are going to perform the Fourier transform of all the rows that you have in your image. Now we are saying that our v is constant, so we are moving in this direction. So these are the columns of the image. So here we are going to perform the DFT of the columns that you have in fxv. Okay, so whole operation of computing 2D Fourier transform of a given image has been converted to a set of Fourier transform of 1D signals, right? And overall, when you combine what you get from a whole exercise, you get nothing but the 2D transform of your original image. Okay, so let us understand this with the help of this example. So in your original domain, you have fxy. This is your original image. Now, with respect to this first discussion, we are saying that we are going to compute Fourier transform of rows. So we are computing the Fourier transform of rows here. So you consider one row here and compute its Fourier transform, second row, and so on. So how many rows you have? You have n different rows, and for every row, whatever transformation you are getting, you have to multiply that by capital N, because in this formula you see that there is capital N in front of it, right? So this particular computation you are going to do for a particular x, and x varies, x takes n different values. So the value of fxy for different x, when you compute, you will get n different functions. So for every function you are going to compute this Fourier transform, and every time when whatever you get in that, you have to multiply capital N. And when you do that, you get this intermediate function fxv. Okay, I hope this is clear to everybody. You have to just consider that this image is nothing but a set of rows like this, and for every row you are computing its and every row is a 1D function. So you consider these rows, perform 1D operation, 1D Fourier transform, and then in every 1D Fourier transform multiply by this n. So we will get this fxv. Now in this fxv, for every column we perform again 1D Fourier transform. So finally we get fuv. So here with respect to y, we have got frequency v. Now overall, when we again do the Fourier transform of columns, then x also gets converted to frequency domain. So now let us see what is the advantage we are going to get from here. So when you are moving from here to here, let's say this is part A, how many 1D transforms you are computing? For every row, how many rows you have? N. So n transforms, right? So to come from here to here, you have performed n 1D transforms. And again to come from here to here, again you have performed n 1D Fourier transforms, because here when you are coming from here to here, for every row you are performing 1D transform, and when you are coming from here to here, you are performing it for 1D for every column. Okay, so n one-dimensional transforms actually you require in the first part, and n one-dimensional Fourier transforms you require in the second part. So how many total 1D transforms you require? 2n. Okay, and you remember what was the complexity of 1D Fourier transform? It was n square if you are using our the normal formulas that we discussed, and it was n log n if you are computing the Fourier transform with the help of FFT. So now just use those results. So for ordinary one-dimensional DFT, we have order of n square complexity. So if you use ordinary 1D transform, then our complexity for this 2D transform is going to come order n cube. And how much it was when we were directly using those double summation formula? It was order n to the power 4. Right? Let me just show you that. With the help of ordinary DFT formulae that we have for forward and inverse DFT, we get complexity order n to the power 4. Now this order n to the power 4 is reduced to n cube if we are computing our 1D, if we are computing the 2D transform of a given image by using this property of separability, where the computation is first done across rows and then done across columns. Okay, so this comes now order n cube, and now if you replace this, if you change the algorithm and use FFT for computing the Fourier transform of those 1D signals, then you will see that you will find this will be further reduced to n square log n, right? But even though if you let's say you don't use FFT, then also you have reduced the complexity by factor n, right? And which is a huge reduction in some sense, you can say. Okay, that's a significant improvement. All right, and so with respect to FFT, we have to just remember the complexity of this algorithm. We are not going to discuss details of this algorithm, but one requirement of the FFT algorithm is that the number of rows and columns that you have in your algorithm, they should be of order 2 to the power n, right? So if you don't have your image of this size, then you will actually do some kind of padding and then make your image size of order 2 to the power n, then only you can apply FFT. Okay, so we are not going to discuss any more details about FFT. If you have interest, you can browse through the literature and then see more details of FFT. Okay, now let us move to another topic and see how can we perform some operations in the frequency domain. Okay, I'm just talking about very simple operations here, and that too very briefly, because all these operations in detail we are going to see in our upcoming lectures. Just to tell you that how in frequency domain you can perform some operations, I am just writing few of them here, but in detail we will see this later. Okay, so now let us say, I hope from all this discussion you know that whenever you are getting any image, if you are taking your image from spatial domain to frequency domain, in the frequency domain, everything you talk in terms of frequencies. So now when you talk everything in terms of frequencies, we can say that our frequencies, in the image we have low frequencies, or we have high frequencies, or we have some mid-range frequencies. Whatever you have in your Fourier domain or in your frequency domain, that can be classified as low frequency or high frequency and so on. For example, if you have, let's say, a frequency image here, let's say this is the Fourier transform. That means if the frequency image of the signal. So then here, if your U is this side and V is this side, you can say, and let us assume that this is 0, 0. So whatever frequencies you have here, they are the low frequencies, right? Near 0, 0, whatever you have, they are low frequencies. Whatever you have close to this, they are high frequencies. And as you move from this side to this side, or this side to this side, they all are high frequency. You are moving basically towards high frequency. So let us say in your image, you want to remove high frequencies. What you want to retain in your image is just low frequencies. So how can you remove high frequencies? So let us say you make a function like this, HUV function, and we are using U and V notation here. That means this function is also defined in frequency domain. How is it function defined? This says that this function has value 1 if the value of, let us say this is, this is the center of the image. So whatever U and V you are considering, if the distance of that UV is less than D naught, then you are keeping 1 there, right? And if the distance is more than D naught, then we are keeping 0 here. D1 is the distance basically. D1 is the distance of a particular UV from 0, 0. Okay. So if you convert this formula to image, you will find that you will get an image like this, where a circle near 0, 0 will have white values because you are saying that those values are 1 and rest of the values will be 0. So now if you, let's say this is your, this is your FUV. That means this image you have got, this Fourier image you have got by converting your image to Fourier domain. And from this particular image, you want to remove all your high frequencies. So what you have to do, simply take this image and multiply them pixel by pixel. So you will find that all the frequencies here in this image, which are outside this circle, they will be multiplied by 0. So all of them will become 0. So if you multiply this with this, what you are going to get? You will get a new f prime, you can say, where only frequencies that are within this circle will survive, all rest of the frequencies will become 0. Okay. So now let's say you got this f prime and then you perform the inverse transform. So when you perform inverse transform on this, you will get whatever input image you are, whatever the final image that you get here, that image you will see that will not have high frequencies. And if you remember our discussion in one of the class, we discussed what is the meaning of high frequency in a signal, or what is the meaning of low frequencies in the signal, and particularly with respect to images. So when you perform this kind of operation, the effect on your image that you will see, it will be similar to what you get when you remove the sharp features from your image. Because as we discussed in the last in that class, that high frequencies are basically represented with the help of more with the help of items which are producing more variability in your image. And more variability in some sense basically mean sharp features. So when you do this kind of filtering or when you perform this kind of filtering operation, you will actually lose the sharp features from your image. Okay, I hope this is clear. Otherwise, we are going to discuss this in greater detail later. We are talking when we'll talk about filtering. So in this whole process, in this first part, we are saying that this process is actually low pass filtering. Why? Because we are only allowing our low frequencies to pass. All high frequencies we have suppressed by multiplying them by 0. Okay, because we are multiplying this signal to this, so we multiplied all high frequencies by 0. So what retained in your image is only just low frequency. So we can say that with the help of this function that we defined in the frequency domain, we can perform low pass filtering in the frequency domain. And exactly same way, if you just change our function and you say if d1 is less than d0, it is 0, and otherwise it is 1, you will find that this function will be nothing but a high pass filtering. All right, this function will define a high pass filtering transfer function. Okay, because in that case, if you just consider this kind of image, then wherever you have white here, that at that place you will have 1 there, 0 there, and wherever you see black portion here, there you will have 1. So when you multiply such HUV to image, whatever is within the circle will become 0, and outside will become actually only outside frequencies will survive in your F. So if you take that back to the original domain, you will find that in that process, since you have suppressed all the low frequencies, and low frequencies are coming because of slow varying features, so you will see that there will be some degradation in those features in the image when you visualize your image that you get after the inverse transform. Okay. So in the first case, when you are doing the low pass filtering, features which were actually represented by high frequencies, they will be suppressed. And when you are doing the high pass filtering, the features which are represented by low frequencies, they will be suppressed in your image. Okay. And with the as we defined low pass filter or high pass filter, we can similarly define the band pass filter, where we are passing or suppressing the frequencies within a range. So we can have two options. In one case, band pass filter, where we are saying that anything which is within that particular band of frequencies is passed, or you can band stop filter, where we just reverse the notion and we say that whatever is within the band is stopped and whatever is outside the band is passed. Right. So with the help of that, you can define these HUV, and if you apply these HUV on your images, you will see that there will be effect of band pass filtering or the band stop filtering in the output. Okay. Now let us discuss few properties of DFT. So one property of DFT is that it is periodic. So DFT is periodic. This means if you analyze the Fourier transform function FUV and you keep plotting it from minus infinity to plus infinity, let's say, you'll find that the signal that you see there will be repetition of certain pattern, right? For example, if you just consider this function, in this function, if you see its Fourier transform here, you find that whatever you see from here to here, the same thing is actually repeated when you go from here to here. Okay, so the first property, that you can just remember with respect to DFT is that the DFT of any signal is periodic. Okay, so it will be periodic if you are talking about a 2D function or 2D Fourier transform. It will be periodic with respect to rows, and it will be also periodic with respect to column. Right. So if you consider the 2D transform, if you if you move across rows, again you will find the pattern will be repeat. Or if you move across column, also you will find that the pattern repeats. Okay. Another important property is conjugate symmetry, which basically says that if you have function fx y and it is real, then FUV and F star minus U minus V will be same. Right? When you say F star, FUV is a complex function. So for any complex function, if you have a plus ib, its conjugate is defined with the help of, this is let's say x, its conjugate is said x star, and that is nothing but a minus ib, right? If aib is your original complex number, then a minus ib will be conjugate. So it says conjugate symmetry, which means if you compute FUV for fxy, which is a real function, and whatever FUV you get, you take its conjugate and replace its u by minus u, replace its v by minus v, you will find that this will be same. Okay. And obviously, if this is going to be same, if you take the mod of both, they will be obviously same. Okay. Now there are two important properties that we are going to discuss. When fxy is real and even, that means the original function for which you are computing DFT, if it is real and even, then you will find that FUV will be real and even. If you see that fxy is real and odd, then we'll see that FUV, it will be imaginary and odd. Okay. And what we mean by even function and odd function? So if you are saying that fxy is even, this basically mean fxy will be same as f minus x minus y. Right? If you replace x by minus x, y by minus y, you will get the same. You can consider a simple example. Suppose you have fxy as x square plus y square. So is it a even function? Yes, because if you replace x by minus x or y by minus y, you are going to get the same thing. So in this example, this function is a even function. Okay. Similarly, if you are saying fxy is an odd function, this basically mean if you replace x by minus x, y by minus y, then you will get a minus negative of the original function. So if you get the negative of the original function, you put an extra negative there, then they both will become same. Okay. So with respect to this, we have these two properties. One that I just mentioned, that if you have a real even function, then its Fourier transform will be real, and another, if you have if your function is real and odd, then your Fourier transform will be an imaginary function. Okay. Okay. So I think let us stop at this moment. In the next class, we'll discuss all these remaining properties. Okay. Thank you.